Hey, it's Diana of Cauldron and Craft. In today's video, I want to talk about laundry, fashion, well, clothes in general, and the environment. I've had this video in mind for a long time, and I've actually filmed it multiple times, the parts where I'm actually doing my own laundry, and then I always thought, is this a silly video topic? And then Abby Cox did a video last week about the differences between historic laundry practices and today's laundry practices and the horrors of modern laundry practices. And I realized that it is a good topic to cover because not everyone knows how they can use what they currently have to make their clothes last as long as possible, and while also getting them sufficiently clean. So Abby does a really good job of laying out the historical parts, which I always love watching her videos because she does so much research, and it's always like I learned a lot of stuff in that video, and then goes on to talk about modern laundry practices and our clothing consumption practices, and how it's this cycle of we've been conditioned to see clothing as seasonal and disposable, and then we treat them like they're disposable, and then they wear out and we have to buy new clothes again, and people don't get paid fair wages to make the large amount of clothes that we do own. And how do we fix that? And also the negative environmental impact. She kind of touched on this, but I actually did a speech about this for Toastmasters at work back in 2019 because this is something that I've been interested in, and then doing the research for that speech got me more fired up about this topic. And basically I learned that before the 80s, in the 70s and farther back, people spent more of their income, a higher percentage of their income, on clothes, but they had fewer pieces of clothes. Like, clothing was way more expensive, and when you bought something, you bought it to wear it as much as possible for as long as possible until if they were a kid, until they outgrew it, and then you probably pass it down to a younger sibling, or if it completely wore out. And of course, laundry practices have evolved with the introduction of washing machines back in, the first half of the 20th century. But then starting in the 80s with global supply chains, and clothing manufacturers realized this opportunity that we can make clothing seasonal. We can say, this is the style for this season, and you have to own this, this thing for this season, and we're going to make it as cheaply as possible. And so pay workers as little as possible to ship these pieces of clothing all over the world, and we're going to make a lot of money. And they did, and they still are. And they've cut clothing quality over time and introduced, man-made fibers and things like that. And what I really appreciated about Abby's video was how she talked about how clothes are weak. Like, this top, I've had it for a really long time, and I like it because it's comfy, but it's like printed on the stretchy material, and it's basically, it could be see-through. And so I really appreciated how she talked about different types of fabrics being weaker when they're wet versus when they're dry, and linen being the superior choice over all other fabrics for many reasons. The strength of the fabric to stand up to harsh washing, the antibacterial qualities, and how other fabrics don't compare in the same way. What can we do about it? First of all, stop buying clothes. And it's easy. I've seen people say that on social media, and that does come with a hefty amount of privilege to just say, I'm just not going to buy clothes anymore. I'm just not going to. Because if you're an adult and you're not going through growth phases like children, then maybe you can stop buying clothes. Basically, what I've tried to do is be very conscious of what I'm buying. I haven't been really into seasonal trends for a while, but I was really in a rut of like jeans and t-shirt every day until COVID. And then, of course, it was comfy every day during COVID. But when I started really watching a lot of people on social media, because I had all this time to start watching YouTube videos, and I got inspired by people like Abby and people in the costuming community who unashamedly, unabashedly wear whatever they want all the time. And I thought, I want to be like that. I want to wear what I want to wear all the time which in my case is dresses, really classically shaped things. I know what looks good on me, and so I'm very picky about what I buy now. It has to be a majority of a natural fiber. I will make some concessions if it's a quality knit. So I do buy from a Shakti.com, which from all the research I've done does pay their workers good wages, and they make clothes that are custom made to your measurements. And I'm very tall, so I probably said that in other videos before, but I'm also really picky about clothes that I buy in stores because they probably aren't going to fit me really well. So when I do buy clothes in this, like from a store, or if I buy them from a Shakti, if it does have a little bit of a synthetic fiber, or especially if it's a little bit stretchy, then I will make a concession for that if I know that I'm going to wear it all the time. And then I've also gotten into sewing, and part of a big reason why I wanted to get into sewing was to make my own clothing, which I have been, and making things that when I have an idea, when I have a vision, I say I know I'm going to wear it with this and this and this and this. And I have a video planned I had this video planned for later in October when it was a little bit cooler outside, because I wanted to talk about this. And then I wanted to have a video where I show my fall/winter capsule wardrobe that I've built, that of things that I've made, of things that I've purchased, and why I made those purchases, why I chose those particular items to buy. But long story short, I'm really picky about what I buy now. Then obviously those things have to be washed. And going back to the whole privilege thing, I work in an office or I work at home. So the days that I'm in office, I'm sitting at a desk or walking to meetings. I'm not doing labor. Like, I'm not doing work that makes me sweat and, that kind of thing. So I do wear my clothes a few times before I wash them, especially in the winter. Summer, I have to wash them way more often because it's hot and I get sweaty anyway. But in the winter, if I'm not sweating in my clothes, then I wear them definitely a few times before I actually wash them. Then when I do wash them, I have this, at this point, multi-step process, because I have different pieces of different types. But washing them on a gentle cycle, number one. If it is a knit, if it's stretchy, and it's like if it's a sweater, then it goes in a bag with other like items inside out. So you'll see on care labels that say wash inside out. Do that. They say that for a reason, and it helps keep the sweater from pilling as bad. And within the last year, I got lazy and I washed all my sweaters. I didn't turn them inside out first, and they got way more pilly than if I washed them inside out on a gentle cycle in a fabric bag and then hang them to dry. Well, I'll get to drying in a second. I have a top loading washer that I bought used, and she kind of described that scenario. So I don't have any experience with front loaders. So I have a top loader with an agitator. That's what I have. So that's why I wash a lot of things in bags, to keep them from getting too agitated or rubbing up against other things in the same load. I wash everything in the same load as much as possible. I tried to make it one load, so I would wash all of my good clothes at one time and not waste water doing multiple loads. One of the things Abby talked about a lot was detergents and surfactants and hard water. We live in an area with very hard water, and even though we use a detergent that we feel gets our clothes sufficiently clean while also not being heavily fragranced or having a lot of skin irritants, there are times that I do feel like I have to do like a deeper clean and stripping of my clothes, and I do that with white vinegar. One of the things that Abby talked about that I don't identify as much with is the grossness of human bodies. And yes, we secrete oils and we sweat and we have dead skin, always kind of shedding, but the idea that we have to be sanitized clean all the time is very much a North American thing. So in other countries, it's not abnormal to not shower every single day or to make sure your clothes are sanitized every single day. I'm not a historian, but I feel like our ancestors would boil their linens because they weren't washing them every single day. They weren't boiling their linens every single day. Side note on that, but if you do feel like you need to strip the minerals that have built up in your clothes and soften your clothes, because you're not using fabric softener, because fabric softener is horrible for your clothes and for the environment, then white vinegar is the best thing. It can kill E. coli, salmonella, listeria. It kills mold, fungus. If you add that to your rinse cycle, it will definitely clean the majority of the bad bacteria in your laundry while also softening the clothes and not adding to the buildup from the hard water and the fabric softener. And going back to fabric softener, we stopped using that. I can't even tell you how long ago, because I was really into working out and my gym clothes always just had this funky smell. I feel like I could never get them clean, and come to find out it was fabric softener, because that builds up in the fibers of the clothes, whether they're regular clothes you wear every day or gym clothes. And it's especially bad for gym clothes because it sticks to those fibers more. And then those are clothes that you are sweating in, that you do have to wash after every use. But it's like the fabric softener gunks it all up, and then funky smells get trapped in it. We stopped using that years ago. Now let's talk about drying. I don't dry any of my clothes that I wear, like my nice clothes. I don't dry any of them in the dryer. And as Abby mentioned, the drying your clothes in a dryer is the majority of the energy usage in taking care of your clothes. So if you just don't dry them in the dryer, you're already saving a ton of energy usage, and you're not further breaking down your clothes because you've already washed them in the washing machine, potentially with an agitator that's going to jostle all around. You don't want to then put them in the dryer where they're going to tumble on and heat. So I hang all of my clothes up when they're still wet and hang them on a rolling clothes rack. So use what you have. Even if you can't hang things outside, or whether it's because of your local laws say that you can't, or if you have allergies that you can't have your clothes just sitting outside and collecting all that pollen, for whatever reason, just hang them up inside. Get like a clothes horse or one of these rolling clothes racks and hang up all your clothes. They're usually dry within 24 hours, depending on how humid it is where I live. If it's a super dry day, they're dry within a day, no problem. I do want to mention that I usually take off my good clothes as soon as I get home from work. But if I don't, something I've learned that I've kind of realized, it's kind of one of those little like mind blow emoji moments, that our foremothers, the women who were typically at home caretaking, when we think of the typical 1950s housewife, I always think of them wearing an apron. Or even farther back than that, when women were doing domestic work, a lot of times they had aprons. It's because it protects their clothes. And I have a half apron, and I have plans to make a full apron, because if I actually do cook in something nicer, then I want to protect my clothes. I've noticed that if I cook in one of those outfits, then it has the food smell in the clothes that I have to then wash the clothes again, potentially sooner than if I hadn't worn it to cook. So that was one of those silly aha moments that I just never really thought of, that you should protect your clothes if you're doing something that could potentially get them dirtier faster or damage them. And how does this pertain to spirituality and the things that I kind of typically talk about on this channel? Well, if you have a nature-based spiritual practice in spirituality like I do, then protecting the environment and doing things to protect the environment are of the utmost importance and are part of your spiritual practice. So as I said in my last video, anything done with intent can be spiritual. Keeping the environment in mind when you're choosing clothes. Are you choosing natural fibers that, while are not inherently good, are still not going to break down in the washing machine and the dryer the same way as a synthetic fiber would? And if they are eventually thrown away, will compost and not just sit there as plastic does. And you're attempting to use less water, you're using less energy to dry your clothes. All of those things add up. I think ultimately the goal for this video when I originally had it in mind was to help other people see that, like proselytize taking better care of your clothes and stop buying into seasonal trends and fast fashion. And so I hope to get other people on this bandwagon, and I think that's what made me so excited for Abby to do that video, because then I thought, yes, this is a topic people want to talk about, and it's not just me rambling about clothes and laundry and fashion. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I would love to hear in the comments your thoughts on fast fashion and how we wash our clothes and the environmental impact of our clothing consumption. And feel free to like it and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.